In the rolling hills of Tuscany, where ancient olive groves cast long shadows and medieval villages perch on weathered stones, something stalked the darkness for nearly 2 decades. Between 1968 and 1985, a predator emerged from the night to claim 16 lives in ways that defied human understanding. The authorities called it the Monster of Florence case, but the files contain details that suggest something far more disturbing than a simple serial killer. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed for more eerie discoveries. It was June 21st, 1968, just past midnight, when the first documented attack occurred near the village of Lastra, a Signa, 20 kilometers west of Florence. The countryside stretched endlessly under a moonless sky, punctuated only by the occasional farmhouse light flickering through dense foliage. This was Lover's Lane territory, where young couples sought privacy among the secluded dirt roads that wound through Tuscany's ancient landscape. Barbara Loxi, a 29-year-old woman, sat in a white Alfa Romeo Giulietta with her companion, Antonio Lo Bianco, a 29-year-old man. The car was parked beneath a cluster of cypress trees, their dark silhouettes creating perfect concealment from the main road. What happened next would establish a pattern of violence so precise and ritualistic that investigators would spend decades trying to understand its meaning. The killer approached silently, moving through the darkness with predatory patience. Witnesses from nearby farms later reported hearing no footsteps, no breaking branches, no sounds of approach. The attack came without warning. Both victims were shot multiple times with a .22 caliber Beretta pistol, the bullets penetrating with surgical precision. But the weapon was only the beginning of the horror. Barbara's body showed signs of post-mortem mutilation that the official reports described in clinical terms, though the details revealed something far more disturbing. The killer had performed specific surgical procedures on her corpse, removing certain anatomical parts with medical precision. The cuts were clean, deliberate, suggesting knowledge of human anatomy that extended beyond casual familiarity. The crime scene, investigators found no physical evidence of the perpetrator. No fingerprints, no footprints, no discarded items. The killer had vanished as silently as he had appeared. For 6 years, the case remained dormant, filed away in the archives of the Florence Police Department. Then, on September 14, 1974, near the village of Borgo San Lorenzo, 30 kilometers northeast of Florence, the pattern repeated itself with terrifying exactitude. Pasquale Gentlecore, a 19-year-old man, and Stefania Pettini, an 18-year-old woman, had parked their Fiat along a secluded country road surrounded by dense woodland. The killer struck again with the same .22 caliber Beretta, the ballistics matching perfectly with the weapon used 6 years earlier. But this time, the post-mortem mutilations were more extensive, more ritualistic. Stefania's body bore wounds that suggested the killer had spent considerable time with his victims after death. The mutilations followed a specific pattern, certain organs removed with surgical instruments that left distinctive marks. The precision of the cuts indicated medical training, yet the ritualistic nature suggested something deeper, more primitive. Local residents began reporting strange occurrences in the weeks following each attack. Farmers near the crime scenes described finding their livestock arranged in unusual positions, not dead, but relocated during the night. Dogs refused to enter certain areas of the woods, cowering and whimpering when brought near the locations where the murders occurred. The attacks continued with clockwork regularity, each separated by months or years, but always following the same meticulous pattern. On June 6, 1981, near the village of Scandixi, Giovanni Foggi, a 30-year-old man, and Carmela Denuccio, a 21-year-old woman, became the next victims. The same weapon, the same surgical precision, the same ritualistic mutilations. But this crime scene revealed something that had been overlooked in previous investigations. Hidden beneath a pile of fallen leaves, investigators found a series of small metal objects, each no larger than a coin. Laboratory analysis revealed they were made from an alloy that contained trace elements not found in standard metallurgy. The objects bore microscopic engravings that resembled symbols, though no expert could identify their origin or meaning. The discovery prompted a review of all previous crime scenes. Teams of investigators returned to the locations where the earlier murders had occurred, armed with metal detectors and specialized equipment. At each site, they found similar objects buried in the soil, always positioned at specific distances from where the bodies had been discovered. The pattern suggested a level of planning that extended far beyond the individual attacks. Someone had been preparing these locations, possibly years in advance, burying markers that would only be discovered through systematic searching. The implications were staggering. The killer had not been choosing random locations, but had been working from a predetermined map, following a design that connected each murder site to the others. On July 19, 1981, near the village of Calanzano, Stefano Boldi, a 26-year-old man, and Susanna Cambi, a 24-year-old woman, were found in their car, victims of the same methodical violence. This time, however, investigators made a discovery that would fundamentally alter their understanding of the case. Hidden in the trunk of the victim's car was a leather journal, its pages filled with handwritten notes in multiple languages. The writing appeared to be recent, though the leather showed signs of considerable age. The journal contained detailed maps of the Tuscan countryside, marking locations that corresponded exactly with the murder sites. But more disturbing were the additional marks, indicating dozens of other locations throughout the region. The journal's contents suggested the attacks were part of a larger pattern, with the completed murders representing only a fraction of the planned activities. Linguistic experts identified portions of the text as Latin, others as a dialect that predated modern Italian by several centuries. Some passages appeared to be instructions describing procedures that matched the mutilations performed on the victims. The investigation took an even more disturbing turn when archaeologists were consulted about the marked locations. Several of the sites corresponded with areas known to contain ancient Etruscan ruins, burial grounds that had been abandoned for over 2,000 years. The connection between the modern murders and these ancient sites suggested a continuity of purpose that spanned millennia. On October 22, 1981, near the village of Calanzano, Paolo Mainardi, a 22-year-old man, and Antonella Miglorini, a 19-year-old woman, became the next victims. The attack followed the established pattern, but this time witnesses reported seeing unusual lights in the sky above the crime scene. Multiple farmers described bright, pulsating illumination that moved in geometric patterns before disappearing just before dawn. The lights were captured on film by a local photographer who had been documenting nocturnal wildlife. The images showed structured illumination that moved with apparent intelligence, forming shapes that resembled the symbols found on the buried metal objects. The connection between the aerial phenomena and the ground-level murders suggested coordination that transcended individual human planning. By 1982, the investigation had expanded to include specialists from multiple disciplines. Forensic anthropologists studied the mutilation patterns, comparing them with historical records of ritualistic practices. What they discovered was a series of procedures that matched descriptions found in medieval texts, documents that had been sealed in monastery archives for centuries. The texts described ceremonies conducted by secret societies that had operated in Tuscany during the Renaissance, groups that claimed to possess knowledge inherited from pre-Christian cultures. The rituals involved human sacrifice performed according to specific astronomical alignments, with the victims chosen based on criteria that matched the profile of the monster of Florence's targets. On September 9th, 1983, near the village of Galuso, Horst Wilhelm Meyer, a 24-year-old German tourist, and Jens-Yu Rush, a 24-year-old German tourist, were discovered in their tent, victims of the same methodical violence. The killer had adapted his methods to the different circumstances, but the signature mutilations remained consistent. This attack revealed another disturbing element. The victims' camping equipment had been arranged in a specific configuration around their bodies, creating a pattern that matched astronomical alignments visible in the night sky. The killer had spent considerable time at the scene, not just performing the murders and mutilations, but creating a complex arrangement that suggested deeper meaning. The final documented attack occurred on September 8, 1985, near the village of Skopje. Nadine Moriot, a 26-year-old French woman, and Jean-Michel Cravikiri, a 25-year-old French man, were found in their car, victims of the same ritualistic violence that had claimed 14 lives over 17 years. But this crime scene contained evidence that would never be fully explained. The car's interior showed signs of extreme heat damage, with metal components partially melted and plastic surfaces warped beyond recognition. Yet the bodies showed no signs of fire damage, and no accelerants were found at the scene. The heat had been applied with surgical precision, affecting only specific areas while leaving others completely untouched. The investigation officially concluded in 1994 with the arrest of Pietro Passiani, a local farmer who was convicted based on circumstantial evidence. However, the conviction was later overturned and subsequent arrests failed to produce conclusive result. The case remained technically unsolved, though authorities maintained that the perpetrator had been identified. The official files were sealed in 1996, with access restricted to authorized personnel only. However, leaked documents revealed that the investigation had uncovered evidence that contradicted the official narrative. The buried metal objects, the ancient journal, the astronomical alignments, and the unexplained physical phenomena were omitted from public reports. Local residents continue to report unusual occurrences in the areas where the murders took place. Electromagnetic anomalies affect electronic devices, causing cameras to malfunction and radio equipment to receive transmissions in unknown languages. The phenomena follow seasonal patterns, intensifying during the same months when the original attacks occurred. The Monster of Florence case officially ended with the final arrest in 2007, though many questions remained unanswered. The evidence suggested connections to historical practices that extended far beyond the actions of any individual perpetrator. The ritualistic nature of the crimes, the astronomical alignments, and the ancient artifacts pointed to something that transcended conventional criminal behavior. What do you think explains the buried metal objects found at each crime scene, artifacts that contained elements unknown to modern metallurgy? Subscribe to explore more cases where the official explanation barely scratches the surface of a much deeper mystery